Welcome to Journeys in Disability Mental Health, a show where we explore the stories and experiences that help us understand the world a little better. I'm your host, Angela Livingstone, and I'm a psychiatrist working with the Victorian Dual Disability Service. Today we're talking about a condition that is still very poorly understood, even within the autism spectrum: pathological demand avoidance, or PDA. For many families, the journey to understanding PDA can be long, confusing, and often isolating. However, this condition is widely understood as a specific profile within the autism spectrum, characterized by an overwhelming anxiety-driven need to resist and avoid everyday demands and expectations. This avoidance stems from an intense need for autonomy and control, where any perceived demand can trigger a fight or flight or freeze threat response to that threat in the nervous system. People with the PDA profile do share many autistic characteristics, but are particularly distinguished by the following traits: an extreme resistance to demands. So this includes resistance to ordinary tasks like getting dressed, eating, going to school, going to work, or even things they typically would enjoy. There's an anxiety-driven need for control, and the underlying cause is that profound anxiety and an intolerance of uncertainty, not willful defiance, although it is often seen as such. One interesting aspect, though, is the use of social strategies for avoidance. Individuals may use tactics such as distraction, giving excuses, negotiation, or withdrawing into fancy or role-play to sidetrack or delay demands. They may appear more sociable or have better eye contact and conversational skills than typical autistic presentations, which can sometimes mask their underlying difficulties in social understanding and interaction. They may have intense emotions and mood swings, which can be rapid and unpredictable. They will often have difficulty with authority and social hierarchies, and they may not inherently understand or respect traditional authority roles, seeing themselves as having the same authority as adults or superiors. And many people with this profile can mask their difficulties in certain settings, like a well-supported school or home environment, contrasting with extreme emotional outbursts later in other environments. Now, PDA is not a formal standalone diagnosis. It doesn't appear in major clinical manuals like the DSM or ICD, but it is increasingly recognized by clinicians and organizations, such as the PDA Society, as a meaningful profile that requires specific support strategies. And this is because the traditional behavioral approaches for autism, focusing on rigid rules and consequences, are often ineffective for people with this profile and can escalate distress. Instead, a flexible, low-demand and collaborative approach is recommended, often summarized by the PANDA mnemonic: pick battles, focus on essential non-negotiables, allow choice and control, negotiate and use indirect language, depersonalize requests, e.g. using something like a toy or a written note, and adapt, be flexible, adjusting your expectations based on the person's anxiety levels. The core principle of effective support is building a trusting, empathetic relationship and reducing anxiety to foster a sense of safety and autonomy. So today, to explore how some of these issues present in real life, I'm joined by Sue, the mother of a woman whose life has actually been transformed by receiving this diagnosis. We'll talk about her family's journey, the challenges they faced before understanding PDA, and the changes that came once they had a name, and most essentially a framework for how to understand what had been happening all this time. This is a conversation about parenting, resilience, and the power of understanding. Whether you're a parent, a professional, or simply curious about the complexities of this profile within the broader autism phenotype, I think you'll find the story both moving and enlightening. So, let's get to it. Today I'm going to be talking to Sue. Would you like to introduce yourself, Sue?
Yes, mother of three. Sally was the youngest. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about Sally and what she was like growing up. Well, Sally was very difficult. Being the third child, you expect them to sort of fit in, because that's what you're told, the third children fit in. But Sally objected to everything we had to do, and with two older siblings, life was very busy when she arrived. There was a school run and there was all the sport and activities, and Sally just objected every time we had to get in the car to go and do something or get out of the car to do. She just objected to everything. She was a very difficult preschooler.
You'd already been through that with your older children.
Exactly.
How's it different with Sally?
She just objected to everything. I mean, when she was in control, she was fine. We lived on 20 acres. The children all had ponies, and she loved being outside. She was wonderful with the animals. She loved dogs, horses, any animals. And when she was outside, on her hill, she was competent and compliant. But it was just when she had to fit in with the others and the timetable that she was very, very difficult. She'd just scream and stomp her feet, and she was just very difficult. Before she went to kindergarten that 1 year, when I was doing a school run and a kinder run with her older sister, I think I was actually really depressed because she was just very, very hard to cope with. Once she went to kindergarten, I had, an hour and a half break, and I coped again. Well, at she was fine at kinder because she's musical, and, I'd be able to take a pet lamb to school or the dog or to kinder. And she enjoyed kindergarten.
Prep would have been a bit of a challenge for her, though.
School was an absolute disaster. It was funny because her older sister at school, she used to come home with worksheets, and Sally used to say, "When can I get a worksheet?" I said, "When you go to school." And that first night she came home from school with a worksheet and lay on the floor to answer the questions and realised that her handwriting, well, she wasn't writing, but in the colouring or whatever she had to do was messy, and that was it. She never did homework in her life, and that just followed on all through school. School was an absolute disaster.
Did you still feel like you'd done something wrong?
Yeah, I knew it wasn't totally my fault because I knew something wasn't right from a very early age. And so I went along to the local recommended paediatrician when she was about 2, and he said after he'd seen her, "Face the fact, you're the mother of an eccentric child."
That's actually quite a nice word. You can be eccentric in all sorts of ways.
And then as the years went on and she's, other people were saying to me, "Gosh, what's the matter with her?" So I had a lot of medical friends, and one of them, a GP married to a psychiatrist, recommended child psychiatrist. And we went to him for a long time, and the family had to go, and then Derek and I had to go as a couple. And after about 8 months, I said to him, "Look, we've been coming for a long time, and you haven't actually given me anything."
So, no change?
Yeah, nothing. And he said, "Oh, that's not fair." And I said, "Well, feedback." And he said, "Sally doesn't have the chance to make her own decisions." That's what, I remember these things so well as if they were yesterday. But he still didn't offer anything else except that, I said, "Okay, I'll take that on board, but she's a third child, it's a busy life. I can't have my life revolving around her." But soon after we gave up with him because, I expected some feedback, something a little bit positive to work with after spending a lot of money.
Yes, of course.
So then school went on, and again in grade 5, the school that she was at, they thought she was ADD, so they sent me along to Children's Hospital. And yes, we filled in all the forms. She's definitely severely hyperactive or whatever, the female version of it. But I was against medication, and Sally was against medication. I even agreed to give it to her for 1 year, but she told me later she just spat it out when she knew I wasn't one. She'd keep it in her mouth, say she'd swallowed it. But then she spat it out. So, and then I was recommended to, when she was in about grade 5, a psychologist, again, another GP friend of mine sent her daughter to this lady and said she was wonderful. I remember everything. So we went along to her, and the only thing she fed back after a long time was she's at the wrong school. She needs somewhere like no, she actually recommended a school with a farm because she understood, having talked to Sally, much she loved the animals and space and being outside. So we changed schools, and then that school, by the time she was in about year 10, I knew the deputy head very well because I was always being called up there because Sally was just disappearing and whatever. She wouldn't do the homework, so the teachers would give her a detention, but she wouldn't turn up for a detention. And so the teachers got very sick of spending their lunch breaks looking for this child who was supposed to have a detention, so she just got away with everything. And the deputy head said to me when she was in year 10, "We're just babysitting. You're wasting your money." So the last school, she went to 4 different schools in secondary. The last one was a boarding school in New South Wales where you could take your horse, and riding was actually part of the curriculum. You could, do dressage and show jumping, and they were subjects. And they had a farm, ag science and they teach them fencing and all sorts of things. So she went there, but again, the number of times I drove up the highway, she wanted a different horse, or the headmaster would ring and say, I've told Sally if she goes over this line, she'll be expelled. She just wouldn't toe the line ever. But they felt sorry, I think, so we managed to keep her there through to the end of year 12. But school was hell.
It sounds like she'd have been labelled as naughty, antisocial, all that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Naughty was the number one. She's a really naughty oppositional child. You've been a very bad parent because, she hasn't learnt, right from wrong, to do what she's told. It was actually extraordinary because her older sister was Little Miss Perfect. And through her school life, everybody was very happy to see me and speak to me, and the parents of her classmates were desperate for their children to be friends. So, I was treated like a princess. When I went anywhere as Sally's mum, teachers and parents alike would actually turn the other way or look down. They would avoid me. It was the most amazing learning experience. And I'd go home and I'd say, but I'm the same person. How can it be that everybody thinks I'm wonderful and wants to be friends? And when I'm Sally's mum, I'm invisible or worse, contagious. It was the most amazing learning experience, that one.
Definitely. Absolutely. So how old was Sally when I saw her?
Well, she was mid-30s.
That's a long time to go with these challenges being unrecognised.
Yes.
Do you want to give a bit of the context in which I saw Sally?
Yes, well, over the years, I was particularly worried about Sally, what I thought was lying. And now I understand is creating a fantasy world for herself where she's in control. But even at school as a young child, she would, coming up to Melbourne Cup, oh yes, we've got a runner in the Melbourne Cup. And she'd say these blatant things that were so easy to contradict and prove that she was lying, but she'd still say them. And I'd get to the school and, oh, you've got a runner in the Melbourne Cup, the teacher would say. And I thought, well, no, but we have friends that have a share in races. I covered up for Sally a lot. I think I felt sorry for her. And that was probably a big flaw in my parenting, that we did try to smooth the road for her when we probably shouldn't have. But this, what I considered lying, really worried me. And as she got older, it happened, more and more over weird things. Like she had a pen pal whose parents were friends of my husband's, and she told them that their sister had died in an accident and all this sort of thing. So the fantasies or the lies kind of got worse. And there was a time after she left school, she actually had a wonderful job at a special development school A lady who went to pony clubs said to her one day, "Sally, you've got a great horse. Do you think you might like to lend it for riding for the disabled at this school?" So Sally thought that was fine. And so she went along, and she got on so well with the disabled children, who were teenagers and difficult, that the teachers actually got her a job as her teacher's aide at the school. And Sally did so well, and they all said how wonderful she was because she could get these children to do things that the teachers couldn't. So, for example, they'd have swimming lessons, and the teacher would be by the side of the pool. Sally would be in the pool with them, and she could get them to kick or move their arms when nobody else could. It was just not an antisocial person. That's not a naughty person. She was terrific with children, disabled, older people. She's always had a heart of gold, and of course animals. But she was earning quite a lot of money at that job, and so she decided to buy her horse a beautiful rug, and this rug went from the ears all the way down the neck, over the back, over the tail. It was just a beautiful rug to keep the horse really warm in winter. But she couldn't wait for winter, so she put it on her horse. It was, I think it was April or something, and Derek noticed, because we're feeding horses morning and night, that the horse was really hot under this new rug. And he said to Sally, "Look, keep it till winter. If you want to put a rug on, put something lighter on." And she just ignored him. So he'd asked her the next day. By the third day, he'd had enough. The horse was in a lather. It was actually wet underneath the rug. And he actually took the rug off and put it on the gate. And Sally came out because he was dropping Sally at work and then taking Beth onto the station because she'd just started a job. She was at university. And Sally saw that Derek had taken the rug off and went crazy, called him everything. And so they dropped her at her work, and she was crying. She was, so apparently, Derek and Beth headed off. Apparently, she went into the school and they said, "What's the matter, Sally?" And she said, "I'm sick of being abused all my life." And so they called in some psychologist, and Sally obviously spoke to them. We didn't know any of this. But the upshot was she didn't come home. And the teacher that we knew that had got her this job just said, "She's fine, don't worry about her." And that was it. So then Derek gets an intervention order against him, and we don't know where Sally is, but we're told she's being looked after, and then we get a court date or something or other, because it was just horrendous. It was very traumatic. So Sally accused her father and her sister of abusing her all her life. So, we have to turn up at the court, and there's a security guard standing there because we're violent people, and Sally's giving evidence from behind a screen. I mean, look, it was just horrendous. Anyway, she disappeared, and we didn't know for a long time where she was, and Derek was distraught because we didn't know who was looking after her. Anyway, that was the start of the decline, because I think mental health became involved around that. Oh, they did, yeah, absolutely. Because Sally obviously went to some psychiatrist. That's when they started diagnosing her with things like borderline personality disorder. So many diagnoses. Oh, she did. All the schizophrenia. Yep. Yeah. But the worst of it was the drugs they were putting her on. Yeah. Because when we got in contact with her again, or she got in contact with us, I found she was on massive doses of fluoxetine, quetiapine.
She had a diagnosis of OCD by then as well, didn't she?
Something like that. But she ended up in intensive care units of hospitals all over the state, overdosing. But it was just horrendous. And at those years, I'd speak to people in hospitals because we'd go and see her in hospital, and I'd try and see the psychiatrist and tell them she was not psychotic. I don't know if she was depressed because, she might have been, but 80 milligrams of fluoxetine every morning and these massive doses of quetipe. And I noticed she's putting on weight.
Olanzapine as well, I think.
Something like that. And she's putting on weight. She's kind of out to it. But they don't listen to me because she's old enough to make her own decisions.
I'm hearing nothing actually got better. Nothing worked.
It was getting worse and worse. This is what was so hard. I was writing to the chief psychiatrist or emailing. I think politicians, this is wrong. Somebody's life's being destroyed and I can't do anything. But no, it all fell on deaf ears. So now to answer the question though, eventually, after about the third time she was admitted to the acute psychotic unit, and there were times I went in there and she was in the lockup part, and I'd say, I want to see Sally. I know you can't. It's not safe. I'd say, for goodness sake, I'm her mother. And, I'd go in and I'd say, come on, Sally, we're going down the road to the cafe. And they'd their mouths would drop open as she came with me. I mean, if she wanted to be, she'd be fine. But about the third time, that psychiatrist did listen to me and he took her off all those medications and things started to improve. But honestly, for all those years, it must have been 5 years in there, she was on that stuff. And I don't know the number of intensive cares to, I think, all the Melbourne hospitals. She's been in psychotic units or, wards, and they never thought maybe it's the medication. And look, it might not have been, but funnily enough, when she was taken off that stuff, she's never had a suicide attempt again. So could it have been the fluoxetine? I mean, they say it can cause suicidal ideation, but I don't know. But anyway, so the psychiatrist that time took her off everything and her life improved. And she was living in assisted living, SRS, and it was fine. She was living there and we'd go and have lunch. She was even bike riding still. Sometimes, we'd ride the bike from Diamond Creek to Eltham, or Eltham to Diamond Creek and back again. And things were pretty good, but she had a fall. She tripped on the carpet in this Eltham Villa place and hurt her knee. And she went to hospital and they said, no, there's nothing wrong with your knee. So they sent her to a rehab. She was there for a little while and they said, no, there is something wrong with your knee. So she went back and they did some procedure. Heaven knows what it was. I can't remember now. But when she was in there, then she wasn't welcome back because she's always been different. So she was homeless and things went bad, really bad.
How long was she in there for?
Almost 2 years.
So she was in the medical ward with nobody really knowing what was going on and staff finding it incredibly difficult to look after her. So she was put on more and more medications again.
Absolutely.
And of course there were all the complications of that.
Yes, absolutely. And a doctor in there said to me one stage, look, you might lose her because she's refusing things like, blood thinners when she was just lying there. And because of her mental health at the time, she was living on McDonald's and pizzas and everything. She'd just ring up and get it because she wasn't paying rent. So she had plenty of money because she'd been on a disability pension. Yes, and she was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It was just a disaster. And then her behaviour was getting worse and worse and worse to the extent that she had two security people outside her room, and whenever a nurse had to go in, these two had to go with them because she was violent, and I just could not believe it.
It must have been hard for you to recognise your daughter.
Well, she was the same, really. I mean, look, so there were times when she was, a bit nasty, but throughout that whole time, well, when she first went in, she bought a dog online on Gumtree or something or other. Oh, this was just before. These people in wherever they were had bought a Kelpie puppy, and they lived in a 2-story townhouse with polished wooden floors. And they decided to get rid of this 10-month-old Kelpie puppy because they said they were going overseas. But, we found, well, obviously they couldn't cope because it took 3 people to catch this dog inside. One's grabbing an ear and one's grabbing a leg, and it was just ridiculous. Anyway, this mad, crazy dog, and within half an hour they were on the phone saying, come and get this dog.
Yes, I can just imagine.
It was just absolutely impossible. So we brought the dog home. But Sally, she's very smart, somehow managed to, well, she probably just bought an assistance dog license on the internet or something. But we had this little license. So theoretically, this dog was an assistance dog.
Could be in hospital.
Exactly. Or it could be taken in to visit. Took it to Obedience every week. So it was improving. But so all through COVID, because COVID had hit in 19 when she was in there, we took this dog into hospital to see her. So she was always quite happy to see us.
Because you had the dog.
Yes, of course. And the dog would get to the door and then just leap onto the bed. But anyway, look, the dog was pretty good, really. But to answer the question, how was it looking? Sally was pretty good towards us at that stage because we were one of the few people that would go in and see her, and we'd take the dog.
How did she get on with the care staff there?
There were 1 or 2 who stick out. One of them, there were times I think she was tied down in her bed.
Yes, I remember she was actually restrained for some procedures.
Yeah. And there was one that would sit with her and sometimes paint her nails and things like that. So, there were 1 or 2 that were absolutely memorable.
That's really good to hear. So what happened next is that the consultation liaison psychiatry team, who had actually been tearing their hair out trying to work out what was going on, asked for an assessment from my service, the Victorian Dual Disability Service. So I came out. I saw Sally, and of course I talked at quite a bit of length to you too, Sue.
That's right.
And that's when I realised that this was likely to be actually pathological demand avoidance. How did that feel when the concept was brought up?
Well, that was a real light bulb moment. That was the moment I knew, after reading your diagnosis and reading what PDA was, that was it. Because none of these other diagnoses ever explained her odd behaviour as a child. The fantasy world that she'd try and create. She hated having a shower, and although she didn't mind water, she would swim. But yes, having a shower. She'd much prefer to just not shower and go to bed in her clothes and just get up the next day and go on. The odd things that had happened as a young child, things like we were on holiday when she was about 3, and we rented a friend's beach house, and everybody was really excited, and the kids, ran to the front door. Our son ran into the house, and Sally ran after them and got to the front door and just stopped. I nearly fell over her. But she just stopped and wouldn't go in, and we had to pick her up. And I think that same holiday, the same sort of thing, they were running out on a jetty. Sally's following, then all of a sudden she stopped halfway along the jetty. And I think, what on earth is going on? And then I realised that when you look down, where Sally had stopped is where the water line started. The sand stopped and the water started. Yeah, but I just couldn't fathom this. But when I read that PDA was based around anxiety, it all fell into place. And then I saw that PDA Society of UK, they've got this pyramid of escalating bad behaviour or whatever, emotions or whatever. And that explained her so well. Because down the bottom of that pyramid, when there was no anxiety, calm and able, and that was Sally. She was, what you would say was normal. As soon as the anxiety increased, you're heading up towards the peak of the pyramid and the behaviour deteriorates.
Yeah.
And so at the top of the pyramid, you've got aggression and fight, flight, which explained perfectly why she was violent to people in hospital.
Yes, because she couldn't get away from the situation.
She couldn't move. She couldn't get out of bed. And honestly, when you said that, I said to them on the ward, listen, you can't treat her like this. You can't treat her like a naughty person. You have to understand. And in the end, nothing was changing. So I said, I insisted they change wards. And on the new ward, I said, she'll be fine as long as she's not anxious. If this starts happening, it's because she's anxious. And if she gets up to there and you need security, it's your fault. And things started to improve.
Because they started listening to you.
But that was it was only because of that diagnosis. Who knows what would have happened to her if you hadn't come along and diagnosed her? Who knows?
Yes, I'd hate to think of where she might be now if things had kept going the same way, if she hadn't had this diagnosis made and people didn't understand her so much better, this clarity of diagnosis.
I would too.
Yes, because the diagnosis is like a roadmap for dealing with a situation that's not understandable by itself in ordinary terms.
Because the fundamental aspect of this, of course, is that it's a developmental condition and it's inbuilt, it's baked in, and she simply couldn't help it. And that I think when people understand that it's absolutely involuntary, that's when you get people treating her differently.
Absolutely.
Sue, obviously having that framework for how to deal with her and being able to tell the people looking directly after her what was going on and why, and to back it up with the actual diagnosis and the evidence, it sounds like it really, really was life-changing for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. It was because, although, unfortunately the damage was done because, taking your sister to court and actually a couple of years later, then accused me and her brother of accusing all of us. So we went back to court twice. So unfortunately, her brother and her sister are a bit over it. This diagnosis, it all happened too late. Yeah. She was in her 30s and they don't see that as, well, they blame her. They think it was just Sally doing the wrong thing, taking them to court. They don't understand that it was part of a condition. It was all too long ago. If she had been diagnosed as a child, her life would have been totally different, I think. But it was all a bit late for relationships like with her siblings. It is a shame because they have no time for her.
For you and your husband, it made a difference, though?
Massive.
And so herself. When I spoke to her the other day, she actually seemed very relieved to have a way to explain herself and have people understand her.
Absolutely. Yep, she said to me fairly recently, it's the only diagnosis that explains what I was like as growing up.
Now, pathological demand avoidance is considered to be part of the autism spectrum, and there are a number of other features of Sally's development that are consistent with that. Did you want to comment on that?
Did that ever come up in the different assessments?
Only with the last psychiatrist. He was suggested to me. She was about 16 at this stage, and I thought he was terrific. He was seemed very practical, but by that time, Sally had had enough of counselling, and she refused to go in one day. We were sitting outside his rooms, and she said, "Mum, you're wasting your money. I just tell them what I think they want to hear." And so she wouldn't go in, so I went in, and then I said, because he had a leaflet in his room, Asperger's syndrome, and I was reading it. And I said, what about autism? And he said, people are too quick to diagnose these things. But he'd only seen her, once or twice, and he was trying to deal with things that the school was worried about. So I wonder if she'd continued to see him, whether he would have diagnosed her at 16. But as I say, she had enough of counselling by then.
And as I was saying, it doesn't look exactly obviously like an autism spectrum diagnosis because the anxiety is so significant that people do anything to get out of those demands, and therefore they will break their own routines and all sorts of things that aren't generally considered part of the autism spectrum with the restricted imagination side of things. But the desperation will drive them to a very wide pattern of behaviours to try and find something that will work to decrease the anxiety.
Yes, well, looking back, I would have, she'd had to be on the autism spectrum. The PDA is part of autism, isn't it?
Yes.
Because she never made friends. She could never keep relationships. She doesn't have friends, which is sad. Yeah, I mean, looking back, I would have thought she was definitely on the autism spectrum somehow.
Yes, but it's distinct from the other more commonly known about forms of autism.
Yep.
True, and it's relatively rare, even in that condition. So, if you could go back to when she was a child and speak to yourself.
Well, I don't think I'd say keep looking for a diagnosis because I tried very, very hard.
I don't think the awareness was there.
Well, it wasn't, although I think it was you who said if you had been living in the UK, she would have been diagnosed when she was about 3. I find that really sad to think that, if other people have gone through what we've gone through unnecessarily. I find that very sad. It's not really answering your question, but the other thing that really gets me is the education system was an absolute disaster. If only our education system didn't try and put everybody in the same box. If it was just a little bit flexible, because she would have been fine, if she could have had different experiences rather than sit in a classroom, open your book, close your book, do this, do that. I mean, it was just an absolute nightmare for her. I guess that's one thing I would say to myself. 10 years ago, of course, she was in her 30s, but as a child, look for a different system. I should have realised that education system wasn't right for her, and instead of just moving schools, I should have looked for an alternative. Something like Montessori, yeah, because, school was a disaster for her.
It sort of set a template for how she was going to respond to all the other different situations too, I guess.
I think it did. And before she went to school, you'd have to describe her as happy and enthusiastic. She usually had a smile on her face and she was energetic and after a few years of school, you couldn't describe her as happy and enthusiastic. She was much more subdued. So, I should have looked for a different system.
Is there anything that you'd like to share with people listening that we haven't covered so far?
I don't think so. I think it's just the same, I guess, as any parenting. Don't expect your child to be like you or see the world the way you do. Just take them for what they are and let them go in their own direction, I guess.
Somebody said to me recently that as a parent, you're a shepherd. Yeah? So they are their own people and you just have to guide and direct them. You can't make them into anything.
Oh, that's right. And yet when I think of my childhood, I sort of did what my parents expected me to do, and so did my brothers. And I suppose I never knew anybody that was outside of that.
There was no other way of being.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yes, you can be wise now looking back and think, I could have done things very, very differently.
Mainly what we need is more awareness of this so that people recognise what's going on earlier.
Absolutely.
These damaging ways to respond.
Yes. Yeah. You can destroy a child's life, really, if you don't understand what's making them tick.
Yeah. So people need to know about this. Pediatricians need to know. Educational psychologists need to know. Severals need to know. GPs, ideally. Yeah, just more awareness would be amazing.
Absolutely.
Because, it's recognised more commonly in Australia now. Often you're only seeing that in late adolescents, adults who are being diagnosed with it at that stage, and you're not seeing it recognised in the very early development, which is when shaping the environment around them.
Yes.
Going to make the biggest difference.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you so much, Sue. I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I'm just so pleased you came to hospital when they asked you to, because it was just made a massive difference. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about PDA, do visit the PDA Society website or have a look at our VDDS webpage for any of our other trainings.